Man, that pregnant pause between the end
So
of the
odd.
music,
Yeah.
it's a little bit too long. Anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, good afternoon, GitOpsians. Welcome back to episode 53, GitOps Guide to the Galaxy. If I sound more formal, it's because I just got back from an event in Dallas where I had to have my most professional face on, like, of all time. But it was a very interesting event. So it was called IBM Tech 2023. And it was a kind of a summit of the IBM top engineering and technical contributors for the previous year, so 2022. And I mean, if you just like search on LinkedIn or Twitter the hashtag IBM Tech 2023, like you'll see the pictures. The event was just the most people I think I've seen in forever. Just like 1,300 of us. And so it was great. There was I forget the name of the person, but she's a space architect, came and talked to us, and it was overall very cool. A highlight level takeaways. IBM loves OpenShift, no surprise. And IBM loves Ansible. And so that was also not really a surprise for me, being from the service delivery and Ansible organization, and also, loving Ansible. But so it was great to see all the different ways they're using Ansible. And then they talked a lot about GitOps, and I took the security track. So there was seminars on security and DevSecOps. And so hopefully we'll get some folks from IBM to come in later months to actually talk to us more about how they're using these things. But yeah, so like super professional voice, super professional face. I had to wear like actual business clothes for the first time.
Yeah.
They said the dress for the event was business casual, and I was like, you guys have not been to San Francisco, obviously.
Yeah, that's right. You don't know what business casual. Show up in a tuxedo. I would have showed up in a tuxedo shirt, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I had to put on real business clothes, but it was super fun, super worthwhile. I'll try to get back to my normal, like, casual self over the course of the stream. And I'm going to kick it over to you, Christian. I know you have some announcements.
Yeah. So I have a few announcements, but actually I'm going to just like lump them all together into one. So the CFPs for ArgoCon, EU, right? So this is the co-located event with KubeCon. So for those who are either going to travel to KubeCon or for those in the area in Europe and nearby, the CFP for that closes on Sunday. But just pretend it's Friday for the CFPs. So it's co-located with KubeCon, and we're looking for, now that the KubeCon schedule is out, you guys can now. I know everyone does this. I don't know why I don't do it. So hit me up on Twitter if you disagree with me. But if a lot of people wait until KubeCon schedules out and then they submit their CFPs for the co-located event. By the way, I'm part of the program committee for ArgoCon, and we know if you double submit. So you so you waiting, it doesn't do any good. So that closes on Sunday. Friday, GitOpsCon CFP closes, right? So GitOpsCon is now, if you haven't heard, co-located with Open Source Summit. So it's going to be in Vancouver. I'm excited to get back to Vancouver. It's been too long since I visited Canada. Vancouver's probably, without visiting other cities, I've visited all the major cities in Canada, but Vancouver's, it's still my favorite. So I'm super excited to go to Open Source Summit. So those two things. If you have CFPs, if you're a GitOpsian, please submit. If you have an Argo talk, please submit it for ArgoCon. If you have an Argo or anything related to GitOps, please submit to GitOpsCon. So, and before he sits there awkwardly for too much longer, I want to introduce our guest today. So I want to introduce Nick Morey, right? So Morey, as we say, right? If you could say it in French, right? So he's a developer advocate at Akuity. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me on here. I just want to say that I've submitted my CFP to GitOpsCon, and I would love to do this.
Awesome.
as an excuse to go to Vancouver for the first time because I'm on the east coast of Canada and it's just not nearly as fun as the west
Yeah.
coast.
Yeah. So it's New Brunswick or where Newfoundland or
I'm in
that's too far.
Ontario, so
Oh,
Kingston,
okay.
just below Toronto, halfway up from New York. Nobody knows what it is, but I'm near other cool places.
Oh, so did you drive over to Detroit then for
It's a whole mess. I had to take an international flight just to get to Detroit when I could have driven to Windsor and then just taken the tunnel over.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm learning how to travel apparently.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. So Nick comes from Akuity, right? So Akuity. By the way, I'm wearing which side am I on? There we go. I'm wearing the Akuity shirt, right? So I got this at the ArgoCon North America. One of my favorite shirts, the red one and the blue one that you have on. I'm gonna collect them all, right? You guys have cool shirts.
I did not get a shirt.
You did not. You should have stopped by the booth. I stopped by the booth.
I think I wasn't as aggressive on the swag collection as you are. To be fair, all of my best conference swag has been because Christian made sure to get me one too while he was there. So
that's true. Yeah,
it's an art for him.
Yeah, it's an art for me. Yeah, it's like because I gave you the helm one, right? This helm one was pretty.
Yeah,
cool.
Mine's blue.
Yeah, yours is the blue one. I have countless Argonauts. I have this guy. I have the retired one from I guess Florida retiree one. I have all kinds. So I got the sneak dog. So that's pretty cool.
That's way cool.
Yeah, so I got a bunch. So like it's just gonna be one day. It's gonna be an episode just showing swag. So from Akuity, right? And so Akuity, right? Startup, right? Started by the creators of the Argo project, right? So that's kind of cool. I've been wanting to get you guys on for a little bit. Last time I talked to an Akuity guy, Alex, he was in Intuit. So it's been a while since I talked to someone from the OG aspect of things. So Nick, I guess without further ado, can you I guess start us off with, what is Akuity, right? And what kind of like problems and issues does it aim to solve?
Yeah. So you kind of got into it a little bit already, but Akuity is founded by the creators of the Argo project. So we've got Hong, Jesse, and Alex all came together to bring Akuity as basically like an enterprise backing to the Argo project. They wanted to, they started out at a startup, I think it was Applex or something, and then that got acquired, and then it got acquired by Intuit, and then they spent a few years there building out the Argo project. And it kind of got to the point where they decided they wanted to dedicate themselves to it. And then that's kind of where Akuity was founded from. And so as a part of that, they decided that they wanted to create a SaaS platform to provide Argo CDs. So that's where the Akuity platform comes in, and is that it's basically a managed SaaS platform for Argo CD with some kind of architecture improvements on top of it. So we'll get into that maybe a little bit more in the demo, but the idea is that they wanted to provide Argo CD as basically enterprise ready and production ready, similar to kind of how OpenShift provides Kubernetes as production ready environments, except for it has all of the security considerations, the scalability, and you basically don't have to think about it as much. And just to answer the question there, right now the Akuity platform is all Argo CD based, but the company is still generally focused on the Argo project as a whole. More on the consultative support side. If you're interested in workflows, you can come and get the expertise from some of the Argo maintainers through Akuity. But right now the platform is all Argo CD based. I think that sums it up. What do you think we should get into? Do you think we should hop right into the demo and I can start kind of showing around?
Yeah. So what was really cool, what I saw on and maybe you can talk about it a little bit, and then you can just let me know when to bring the screen sharing on. But on Twitter and it was mentioned on Twitter, and you kind of chatted me about it. It's like as you were playing with OpenShift and Akuity, there was an update made to the Akuity platform to better integrate with OpenShift, which I think is really cool. I told you the system works, right? Like it's kind of cool to get that, in open source, right? Like you make a lot of these discoveries and these fixes just by the nature of just like interacting with you. Like, can you talk a little bit about that, and then just kind of let me know when to like bring the screen on.
Yeah, sure. So, I don't have extensive OpenShift knowledge, so it's really fun going in and setting up. For the demo today, I set up OpenShift dedicated on GKE or on GCP, I suppose, and like one of the first things I run into, which I think is what most people run into when they get started with OpenShift, is the security context constraints, because there's just such a wealth of like baked in security to OpenShift that you have to kind of be conscious of it as you're deploying things. And that's what I ran into trying to get the Akuity agent onto OpenShift, is how can we make sure it complies with the security context constraints of OpenShift while also just generally working on any CNCF certified K8s distribution. So, through my testing, we ended up finding what we needed to make the agent manifest compliant with OpenShift, and we just applied a patch. So now it just works by default. You don't have to go and like patch the agent manifest just to be able to, for all the pods to start up correctly. So if we want to jump into the demo, I can start showing that off. So yeah, that's a great question from Tal, comparing the difference between Argo CD Vanilla and the Akuity offerings. So there are some important differences, and I think the best way to do this is probably to go through the demo, and I can kind of point it out as we're interacting with the platform.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then Tal, you can just let us know if you didn't get your specific question answered. I think we're going to try to have some time for more Q&A at the end.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. So starting off, we're on OpenShift dedicated here. This is my cluster that got deployed onto GE, which was a really fun experience. I set up some like basic Terraform to do like the project and service account creation, and then just providing that service account credentials to OpenShift dedicated, and it went and did everything else. Like, I'm pretty sure this isn't a basic GKE installation. This is like compute nodes, and OpenShift does all the bringing the nodes together, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So
yeah.
Actually, Hilliary would be more inclined to know the ins and outs of dedicated than anyone else, I think. So you asked the right person.
Yeah. Great. So I've been doing SRE work on OpenShift dedicated specifically. Yes, that's exactly correct. So the installer, it first goes through and it brings up the control plane, and then it'll go through and actually start doing the other machine set work to get up all the nodes. And so it starts with the master nodes and the infra nodes, and then you get down into the worker nodes. And so you can see all of those pieces. So there's some orchestration into how the installer works. And so yeah, it'll go through and orchestrate all the pieces. And as you know, when you're setting up an OpenShift dedicated cluster, unlike vanilla Kubernetes, we do actually have a networking stack option. So it'll actually go do based on what networking stack you tell it you want, because there's a second one as of, I don't remember if they released OVN in 4.11 or 4.12. It's definitely out now.
It's 4.12. It's been out since like 4.8, but now it's the default.
Now it's the default, yes. So there's actually two, and so depending on which of the two you choose, it'll go do all the networking stuff based off of what your selections were.
Very cool. So I think I like that, because I've worked with GKE pretty extensively, and you can kind of hit in into some limitations with it, especially with scaling the master nodes and the API server. I've run into some limitations with that. So I imagine taking the pure compute resources gives it a lot more flexibility in how you want to manage Kubernetes or OpenShift on Google Cloud.
Yeah. And to be fair, honestly, I was actually slightly surprised you said you did it with GCP instead of AWS, because that's such a small subset of our fleet. Not that you would see it on your side of things, but actually the OpenShift cloud versions, GCP, AWS, and Azure, there are some slight differences in the orchestration way back on the back end and how we have to do things. So they actually all have their own separate. You end up with the same like feature parity, but there's a lot of development and various teams that are actually going into actually making that happen to ensure that we're able to best utilize whichever cloud platform or hyperscaler we're interacting with.
Right.
And all that goes into even more cooler stuff on like some of our future things. And if people are paying attention around, I don't know, Open Source Summit or Red Hat Summit, you might be hearing people talking about these things from Red Hat, and especially at this coming summit, I know you're going to be hearing, or for Red Hat Summit specifically, you're going to be hearing things about those. So I won't steal anybody's thunder or previewing on there, but keep an eye out on some of the other cool things that we're doing to make that experience even better.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, it's interesting. There must be some pretty like intricate nuances between deploying to the different cloud platforms. Like they try to say it's all just cloud, it's all just compute resources, but interacting with them it can be a challenge.
Yeah, it can be a challenge, absolutely. But we have some of the. I'm going to objectively say we have some of the best engineers in the world on the problem. That's an objective statement with zero bias.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so yeah, we've got our OpenShift cluster, and so what I'll do is I'll swap over to the Akuity platform here. So I'm already logged into my organization, my Morey Tech organization, and basically I'm going to start by just spinning up a new Argo CD instance. So that this might be one of the first differences you'll see between the open source and a SaaS platform is that I'm going to create and deploy Argo CD just by clicking a button here. We're going to go with v2.6 here because we're living on the bleeding edge. One of the benefits of the
latest, you're the latest and greatest. Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool because Akuity is so tightly integrated with the open source Argo community, and that we have some core maintainers on the engineering team, is that the Akuity platform can really stay up to date with the new Argo CD releases as they come out, because they're still actively working on these releases. They know when they're coming out, and they're ensuring that there's compatibility with the Akuity platform as it happens. And so maybe I'll go into the next key difference is that the architecture of connecting clusters to the Argo CD instance has been kind of re-architected on the Akuity platform to an agent-based model. So if you're familiar with open source Argo CD, you know that if you're doing a multi-cluster environment and you want one central Argo CD control plane, you probably have Argo CD hosted on like a management cluster somewhere, and then that management cluster with Argo CD in it is going to need direct access to the Kube API servers of the clusters that you want to connect. Well, with the Akuity platform, with the agent-based model, we'll just go and we'll provision an agent, and then we'll deploy that onto the cluster that we want to connect back to the platform. And then that way, you really only need egress traffic out to the internet allowed for you to manage that connected cluster from a central Argo CD control plane. So it could be across multiple cloud providers. It could be a kind cluster on my laptop, or in this case, it could be OpenShift dedicated in GCP without any special networking required to expose the API server to the Akuity platform. So, while I was talking through that, I provisioned a new agent for the cluster. And for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to download the agent manifest, but it does present you with a single command that you can paste with your kubectl context already configured. You can paste that to deploy the agent. But in this case, I'm going to open up the downloaded file, and yeah, if you can get it fast enough, steal that token, and then you might get something fun deployed to your cluster. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know.
So now that I've got the agent manifest downloaded, I'm just going to go back to the OpenShift dedicated platform here, and I'm just going to import the YAML directly. So these are all the manifests that make up the agents deployment. Probably no need to poke through these right now, because once I hit create here, it's going to go and display all the resources that that's being created. So we'll just give that a sec. They're all created. Great. So if we go over to workloads, deployments, and I'm going to filter it down by the Akuity project. Yeah, that's the cool part, is that each agent is getting its own token to connect back. So worst case, if you get it, I'm just going to go and delete it, or I'm going to deploy some cool stuff to your cluster. So let me know if you get it.
Yeah, that sword cuts both ways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that pipe goes both ways, right? So it's
yeah. So just to talk about a little bit, that patch that we created to make the agent manifest work directly with OpenShift. The problem I had run into is that Redis didn't want to start because it had a custom UID set for the pod, which the default security context constraints were not happy with. And I had to either go and create a service account and assign that to the any UID security context constraint. But in this case, we patched the manifest to solve that problem upstream, making it just a simple deployment of the manifest. And so while I was doing all that talking, we can see that the agent was deployed and has connected back to the platform. It's looking healthy. We've got the correct version installed. We've got our Argo CD instance up and running. And what I'm going to need to do here is enable the admin account for Argo CD so that I can go and log in. If you're familiar with the open source, normally you'd have to go and grab that initial secret that's generated by the Argo CD deployment. In this case, I can just go pull it from the UI of the Akuity platform. And I'm just going to generate a new password, because we obviously aren't going to go and store the admin password for you. But what I can do is just regenerate it every time I need access to the admin user. In reality, you're going to go and you're going to, yeah, right? That's my favorite
cool,
feature.
Yeah.
I hate going and pulling that secret from the cluster and having to use base64 to code. And it's no fun.
Easy button, right? Essentially, it's just click.
Yeah. And in reality, you're going to go and you're going to set up SSO. If I'm going to leave this Argo CD instance up for any longer than this demo, we would be configuring SSO and just logging in that way. But let's just go and copy that password. And so as a part of the Akuity platform, you automatically get a domain for your Argo CD instance. And I can click right in, and it's going to present me with the Argo CD UI that anybody that's seen the open source is going to be familiar with, which is ultimately the goal of the Akuity platform, is to provide the same user experience of Argo CD. You're still going to get the same UI, the same API integrations, the same CLI experience that you're used to, but you don't have to really think that hard about managing Argo CD as a service in a cluster. Similar, I imagine, to OpenShift, is that you get Kubernetes and now you get to use Kubernetes. Well, with the Akuity platform, you get Argo CD and you can just use it. You don't have to worry, how do I make sure this scales with my organization or my workloads?
Quick, I have a quick question. Is there
Please.
Is there an ability to add SSO, or is that like a roadmap item, or
yeah, SSO is.
Oh, look at that!
Right
it's there. Yeah,
cool.
Cool.
And
is that used
not
like Dex or something in the back end, or?
Yeah, that's the thing, is it's still using the same configuration that if
Sweet.
you're already using open source. So basically, you can go and take your existing config map for SSO and just go paste these parameters into here. And
that's pretty cool.
And it'll also store the secrets that you need for the client ID and the client secret. You can go pull that from the Akuity platform instead of having to manage it in your, say, management cluster that's hosting Argo CD. So yeah, going back, we have Argo CD now, and I didn't have to stand up a cluster to host it in. And for the demo, I'm just gonna deploy the classic Helm guestbook. I don't know if it's classic to everybody else, but I know I've deployed this at least 100 times at this point.
Yeah, guestbook or what's there was a popular one. There's pod info. There's like that one that's like everyone uses. There's which was the other one? Guard. I forget what it's called. It's that long time ago. The Heptio guys had like a sample app, and it was like everyone used it.
You know, I bet Andrew Block would know that answer. Where is he? Can we like phone a friend? Where is he? Who's got his phone number? Where in the world is Andrew Block today?
Yeah, so for just to kind of talk about some of the details of this application deployment. So in the Akuity platform, we saw that I provisioned a cluster with a specific name. Well, when I go to deploy my application, I can use that name to describe where I want to go and deploy the resources for this application. So the destination is the same as the agent name here. We're going to deploy into the Helm guestbook namespace. We're going to auto create that namespace, and we're going to use my Argo CD examples app because repo because it's so much better than the upstream project because I've added folders.
Not to brag or anything.
Yeah. There's a cool cube green example if you're interested. Go check out my repo. A small plug. So I'll click save here. It'll translate it into the configuration for the wizard. And then we'll go and we'll create this application. So the interesting part here is that the actual application custom resource is getting deployed to the Akuity platform. And then only the resources that are generated by that application end up in the connected cluster. So you're not adding all of the Argo CD custom resource definitions to every connected cluster. The Akuity platform will host all of that, and then it just deploys the resources generated by that application. So it kind of, please.
Sorry, I'm going to be annoying here. We said every connected cluster. What is like? I don't actually know this answer, and you would think I would. What's like the maximum number of clusters that this can manage?
It's a hard question to answer. I was actually discussing with some people in the CNCF Argo CD Slack about how do you measure how much an Argo CD instance can scale on its own. And currently in our stress testing of the Akuity platform, we've tested with, I think it's something like 5,000 clusters and 10,000 applications and haven't run into any limitations. So the best answer is, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I actually asked this question, and Intuit says, and so I we all talk to the Intuit engineers in the upstream Argo.
Of course.
For them, per Argo instance, it's about 350 clusters, 550 repos, and about almost 3,000 application per Argo CD instance. And that the usual caveat of like, you need to set your resource limits and quotas, and like you need to like adjust those. But like, that's kind of like what Intuit told me. I'm pretty sure there's other folks that have either reached an upper or lower limit of that, but that's at Intuit on average. That's kind of that's what I've been told. So don't get mad at me if you run something an issue.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting is comparing that to the Akuity platform is that with the agent-based model, you're kind of distributing the workload of Argo CD into each of the connected clusters, because ultimately the generation of like the components that you would need to scale on a single Argo CD instance are now spread out between all of the connected clusters, and the processing requirements for each cluster are self-contained in that cluster, with a caveat that you can dedicate the repo server to a specific cluster. So if you've got like one cluster that you want to connect to your private Git repo or like a internally hosted one, you can go and you can use the what's called the Git delegate feature to go and say, I want this cluster connected to Argo CD to do all of the repo processing, and that includes Helm and Git. Even though it's called Git delegate, that was a fun debate. But yeah, so honestly, we're going to do some scalability testing, and we're going to do some content around it to really try to compare the differences, to educate anybody that's interested in answering that question. But it's a hard question to answer because you can really tweak the open source one. If you want to get down and dirty into the components, you can like tweak the parallelism limit of like the repo server to say, like, if I give it a ton of a ton of resources, I want it to be able to generate 100 applications at a time, or it's a fun question.
It sounds like the architectural model follows some of the foundational models for high performance computing. So that could get, then you're mixing the scale of the linear scale and the jet lag kicked in. The other one. Vertical. Yeah. Thank you. I did the hand thing. I had the direction. I just could not come up with the word. Jet lag is the worst. Anyway, right. So then you get into the exact tweaking on how much to scale vertically versus how much to scale linearly. And then that is going to completely alter your numbers. And then you're going to start hitting limitations that are just things like you said, like wherever the bottlenecks end up in, like, okay, we've got one Git source, or we've got, only this much throughput on our networking, or whatever that ends up being.
Yeah. It speaks to the importance of like clarifying the parameters of that question. Like, how much can it scale? Well, that's kind of a broad question. How much can it scale under these conditions? Now that's a question I'm happy to answer.
It's like every question should come with you doing a homework as a question. Right.
I meant for the SAS. And I just assumed that somebody had done benchmarking and imposed limits that aligned well within the benchmarking so that there would be a good customer experience. So maybe that was my mistake. I didn't qualify that appropriately. But we'll stay tuned for those answers out of Akuity. I expect to see them like tweeted someday.
Yeah,
maybe.
Certainly. Yeah. When we do our scalability testing, trust me, you'll hear about it, because I've seen the internal demos of it, and it's pretty impressive. So I'm excited to do some content around it. And so all that to be said is our application is now ready to be synced after all of our conversation, and we'll go ahead and we'll do it. So this will do the generation and deploy the resources onto our OpenShift cluster, which if we go back here and we change to our Helm guestbook project, you can see that we now have a deployment, and we now have pods for that deployment, all from the Argo CD instance that is hosted on the Akuity platform here. And we can see that our sync history is showing up in the dashboard for the Argo CD instance. We've got one successful sync. And if we go and we look, we've got a pod working here, which there's a small secret that I had to do to make this pod work, which is I deployed let's see here, a role binding, which for sake of demonstration here, I'm going to go and delete that role binding so that we can understand.
We'll break it.
Yeah, we're going to break it so that I can show the pains that I went through trying this out. So what we're going to do is, let's see if I can find it here through let's see. I think I want it's the Helm guestbook namespace, and I want a role binding, and it's going to be named NEUID, this one. Okay, just pretend you didn't see that, and we're going to go, and I'm going to go and delete this replica set to show the demo. So the Helm guestbook is going to go and create a replica set, and strangely, we're in a crash loop backoff, and if we look at the events here, there's nothing really specific about the deployment of this pod that's preventing it from working. But if we go to the logs here, we can see that it's having trouble binding port 80. Now, I'm wondering if you guys can help me understand why we're not able to bind port 80.
Looks like a privileged port. And so so I mean that's the short answer, right? So but like the when OpenShift spins up a pod, right? And it depends, like how much time do we got? Like so a pod is nothing more than kind of just like C groups and all of that stuff wrapped around containers, right? And that container is nothing but like a process, right? A Linux process. But that Linux process has to run as a user, right? Like, because like, Linux, Unix, right? Everything's a file, and everything has to run as a user, that sort of thing. When OpenShift spins up a container, a pod, it assigns a random UID. So
if I go look in the manifest here,
Yeah.
I should see. Okay, yeah, run as
Yeah.
that does look
Well, it's
pretty
easier.
random.
So it is completely random, and it's like in what is that, 100 million range? I don't know what it is, but it's like there's a range that it runs, right? And so for those who aren't sysadmins, for those who don't know Linux, and we're now in the age of like cloud, where it's like you can actually be a cloud admin and not know Linux all that well, which is fine. Which is like it's like it's so abstracted. It's not like I'm making a pejorative statement. It's just true. If you don't know, like if you're like a developer or stuff like that, there is a privileged port range, right, that you cannot bind to. So if you have a process like port 80 is a port that that a regular user can't bind to. It's just it's marked as privileged. And so
I think it's anything under 1024.
1024 or 1023. I don't know if it's zero based or not, but I don't know if there's a port zero. I don't think so. I think port zero is every port, something like that. So if you're a network, genius, please drop that in the chat, because I'm not 100% sure. But anyways, yeah, 1024.
I used to know that, but
I used to know that
in so
yeah,
long.
exactly. Yeah,
I
haven't used it. So yeah. So anyways, that's the issue, right? In order to there's anyways, I don't want to elongate this too much, but the short fix is to do either any UID, or there's also a security context constraint called non-root, meaning use any UID except anything that's root.
Right.
So that's one. But since you're binding to port 80, you probably this isn't in your image, right? This is just like a Helm chart. The real fix is don't run your applications on privileged ports. There's no in the age of containers, you can't make an argument for running on port 80. The only argument is it's a legacy app, and at that point, I'm saying you're writing it into a container. Change it then. If you're refactoring it, might as well refactoring it to run on 8080. Because
I was about to say the real fix is actually to change the port number to 8080. As much as the role binding stuff absolutely 100% works, that what I would have told you to do is change your port to 8080, 8088, anything of that, so that we're not using privileged ports. Almost it's port 80 and port 443, right? It's like all the in and out piping of the internet is done basically through, or networks really, is done through port 80 and ports 443. And you could do port forwarding too if you have to as well. And actually, I don't remember how to do it in OpenShift because I've seen it done like one time, but you actually can do port forwarding through all this stuff if you need. Just like you can with anything. But yes, so however, your role bindings thing is important because everything you've mentioned, you've hit the any UUID or any UID, the role binding stuff is actually things that I hear a lot and I see a lot that people hit. So I do want you to go through the way you fixed it, even though your SRE will tell you, no, don't use that port. But I do think that this is a very useful thing for folks at home, maybe just getting started with OpenShift to see.
Yeah, certainly. So I'll go through kind of my journey of solving this problem. So port 80, I started to get it. So after I found out that we're setting a very specific user ID. Now, this is a question I had about OpenShift. Does it assign a specific range of UIDs to each namespace, or
Yes.
is it like
Yes, but that also is random. So you can't.
Okay.
It's like when you create a namespace, it assigns like this is the UID range for that namespace, and if you delete it and recreate it, it'll be a completely new number.
Okay. Very
That's
cool.
why the service accounts and everything else becomes so important, because they can keep track of. It's basically a reference to the thing, and so the thing can be whatever because they know where what the reference is, and the reference is static.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you for explaining that for me.
I'm not sure if I explained that the best, but that's like the quickest way I can explain that, I think. And
Yeah.
the documents I linked earlier have more on that.
Great. Yeah. So, after figuring out the whole UID thing, and it took me a minute to relate that it's setting the UID within the container, and then that prevents it from doing a privileged port. So once I got through that, the first thing I thought is that I might just update the container port here, but obviously the container image isn't pulling which port to run from based on the spec of the pod. So what I ultimately had to do, because I don't own this container image, I'm just stealing the Heptio one, is to go and apply a role. So the role binding I ended up needing to use, which this was generated by the OC command line, so I take no credit for crafting this, is a role reference to the NEUID role, which my understanding is that it will then let my container run as whatever UID it's default set to run, and it's not going to auto inject that run as user ID parameter. And then the subject is the default namespace, default service account in the Helm guestbook namespace, which is what my pod is running at. And so by creating that on the cluster, I should be able to go back to Argo CD here, and I'm just going to restart my deployment to generate a new manifest. Which, am I the only one that gets this Argo CD bug of like the menu is hidden if you're too small? Every time I stream, my page is too small.
I ran into that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad it's not just my Chrome browser. So if I restart it, we'll get a new replica set, which will regenerate the pod deployment, and it's happy. It looks like we were able to bind onto port 80, and we'll notice if we go and we look at the manifest here, the security context no longer has the run as UID specified. So that was my journey of working with OpenShift, is learning about security context constraints, which taught me, or I guess helped me relearn a little bit about containers and networking, which was a lot of fun.
Well, what's interesting is that you're with containers, right? Kubernetes and containers, like you're like forced to care about security a little bit more. And I only say that because the point of isolation no longer is like a VM, because like like from VM to VM, like if there's a kernel vulnerability in one, it probably won't be in the other if you upgraded the other one, right? But whereas like in containerization, right, like if a node has a kernel vulnerability, every container is now affected, right? So like you actually have to like they're no longer Dan Walsh has a great talk called "Containers Don't Contain," and they actually don't, right? So like, they're just processes, right? They're just Linux processes running on a system, in a change rooted system. So it's like you actually do have to think about security a little bit more, which is kind of what we try to do with OpenShift, right? We try to give it like the easy button, meaning like you're secure by default, and if you want to do anything else, you kind of have to like modify to your to your needs. Like using any UID isn't inherently insecure, but it's better than using privileged, right? Because there's a SEC security context constraint called privilege, which is basically like you have access to the whole node. Like if you never use privileged unless you know what you're doing, because it's That's a terrible idea. Any UID, you're just root in the container, which is, you know, may or may not be what you want or whatever, right? It, you know, it's not as bad as privilege. So
yeah, I would say it's. I don't even know if I would really say that it's root either, because that's one of the things that OpenShift does is you actually can't use an image that has a root user. So I did this the other day. I was deploying Postgres onto code ready containers, or I'm sorry, they've renamed it. I'm just not with the times. OpenShift local. I was using OpenShift local, and I was like, oh yeah, I need a Postgres. And you know, this is me hacking around at like 10:30 at night, and I wasn't awake. So I just grabbed a copy of some YAML for a Postgres instance off of one of their tutorials or whatever. And then of course it would not start. I was like, why won't you start? There's nothing wrong with this. This should be perfect, right? This YAML lints, I didn't like screw up my copy pasta. Like everything should be fine. And I go look at the logs and it says complaining about root. I'm like, dang it. Right. I need to go get the OpenShift version. So then I went and I think the key or Quay, depending on whose side of the debate you are on that, they had one. So I just went and used that one, which was well and good and easy. And then everything just worked like magic the way I wanted it to. But it's an important note that you can't just use any image on OpenShift. It actually has to have one that's been through certain security protocols, like removing the root user, which removing root users from Linux images is actually like a very, very big thing. I came from IoT right before I came over to Red Hat, and we removed the root user from our IoT servers as well. You just they didn't exist.
BusyBox, right? Remember that a BusyBox image from the Linux BusyBox, right? So like, there's no root, and that's like in the IoT devices. I remember like hacking some of my my internet devices. Hopefully Spectrum's not listening. And like it's a BusyBox image, and like you said, Hilliary, it's like there's no root, right? It was imaged with this operating system with no root, so it's very important.
Yeah. So you have users that are privileged, right? They have a lot of privileges, but they don't actually truly there's not actually truly root access. And so the only way to, well, I won't tell you how to hack that. Never mind. I won't tell you how to get around that. I'll let you all go figure that out on your own. That is knowledge I don't feel like getting in trouble for sharing.
Yeah. So, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I think I really like that about OpenShift, is it speaks to like the benefits of least privilege, is that like start with nothing, and then you have to be conscious of what you're giving your services. And to speak to your earlier point, is Kubernetes is taking all of these VMs that used to be individual components, and now it's just one big system. So least privilege matters more and more as we get into these giant distributed systems of, like, sure, a container over here in Asia could now affect the rest of the system that's running over in North America just because it's one big Kubernetes cluster.
Yep. A colleague of mine, Christoph Blecker, people in the Kubernetes community will know him from steering. I'm just going to call him out. He said this one time on a meeting. He said, most amount of actions, least amount of access. And I don't know if he originated that or he stole it from somebody else, but I love that. And I say it all the time. It's another way of restating the exact same thing. But I like it because for me, that almost gave me the ability to like mentally visualize the principle. Maybe your brain doesn't work like mine, but I liked it when it was put that way, especially because I almost have like this mental image of how it works.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's whatever analogy works for you, sort of thing. So, So as I was actually kind of looking, we're kind of rounding up the last 10 minutes. By the way, if anyone has any questions, drop into the chat. We'll talk about it. We'll have some fun with this. But I kind of want to give some time to Nick about talking about like what can you tell me? I don't know if Hong's watching, so I don't know if you'll get in trouble. But what can you tell me about like what's up and coming with Akuity and with some of the things right now, it seems like very Argo CD based, as you said, but like there's other functionality coming down the roadmap. Like, I imagine you're gonna start implementing something like Argo rollouts, which is quite popular, or something in that space. But what can you tell us about, like, what's the roadmap for Akuity? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah, it's a great question. The Argo ecosystem is quite broad, and obviously the Akuity platform is focused on the Argo CD side right now, and there's still a lot of effort that we want to put into that. Mainly, we're adding first class support for the broader Argo CD ecosystem. So if we take a look here, one of the examples of this is that, like, we're building in things like the Argo CD image updater, which is a tool that is loved by a lot of Argo CD users, which allows you to take a container registry, and as new images get pushed there, automatically update your Argo CD applications in kind of a GitOps anti-pattern, but also you can write back to Git, so it kind of all comes together in the end. But adding that as just a one-click feature that you can go and add to your Argo CD instance, instead of having to go and deploy image updater as a separate service into your cluster and then integrating the two together. So taking the ecosystem tools like that and bringing them all together into one platform is a big priority, because really go and experience all the functionality of Argo CD and just think less and less about maintaining it and managing Argo CD. So there's that, and there's some upcoming open source contributions that we're really excited about. It's further down the roadmap, and I can't say anything too specific, but we are still very committed to contributing back to open source and maybe proposing new things that can go and broaden some of the GitOps tooling. So Hong, if you're watching, no secrets spoiled, a little anticipation built.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's good, because now you're like, you got our attention. Like, oh, it's a secret. Now we want to know. Now we'll stay tuned. That's one of the
Hound me on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. Follow me on Twitter. Yeah, that's one of the things I really liked about Akuity. And Hong and those guys, Jesse and Alex, is like they've always been open source first, and us at Red Hat, that's our thing, right? So we always appreciate that. That's something definitely right up our alley.
Yeah, I'll say I love the air of mystery here.
Yeah, for sure.
I was gonna say it's almost a callback to my air of mystery earlier, where I was like, go look at this thing for this eventual announcement that you're gonna care about. Like, I'm like, okay, well now what thing do I go follow to look for, so the announcement that I inevitably am going to care about, right? So your Twitter is fine. I'll stalk you there. I can do that.
That's perfect. And
have your Twitter, because I wanted to display it. Christian, did we do that?
I will do that right now.
Perfect.
And speaking of my Twitter, if there's any Argo CD users out there that have what they think is a really interesting use case, hit me up. I want to learn about it. I'm not going to sell you on anything. I'm not too concerned about that. I want to learn about cool things that Argo CD users are doing, because that's my favorite part of this role that I'm in, is getting to learn about what edge cases are you running into, or what really hard problem did you have to solve with implementing GitOps in your organization with Argo CD. So definitely give me a shout out on Twitter, or hit me up on the CNCF Slack, and I'll happily meet with you about it.
Yeah, that's by the way, for anyone interested in the Argo project ecosystem, CNCF Slack is a must. You have to be there, because that's kind of where all the Argo project users hang out, since it's a graduated project now. We get to say that it's part of the CNCF ecosystem. So for sure, you'll catch me there. You'll catch Nick there. Hillary's there at times.
Every now and again, when I remember that it exists, I'm there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, CNCF Slack is a must, especially if you want to talk to the engineers. You have a question, right? I also like hearing how people are using Argo CD, because we have our opinions, right? We have our point of view, but like we want to see how you're using it, right? That's the only way to make the product better.
Of course.
The only useful thing I've ever done on that Slack, but I'm really, really proud of it because I was doing it completely blind, was help somebody figure out why their upgrade didn't work. But I will point out that if not me, somebody else there is fully capable of helping you out if you're hitting technical problems as well. And that's the one thing I liked about the community, was seeing that was a place where you could ask questions if you got stuck in like deployments or upgrades or what have you. So I'm going to speak for the community and say they don't seem to have the attitude of that there are stupid questions. They seem to have the attitude of whatever we can do to help. So I recommend just for that reason.
And I'm always shocked at how active the Argo CD Slack channel is on the CNCF Slack, because it's like every day there's people just sitting in there happy to answer questions, no matter if it's a really strange edge case you have or you just can't find the right page in the documentation, which is me half the time.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's the worst. You read the thing. You don't remember where you read it. At that point, you're just frustrated, and you need somebody to tell you where the thing is that's in front of your face is. And that group is so willing to do that. And I love everybody in that Slack for that.
Awesome. All right. Is there any other questions in the Tal? Do you have any other questions, or anyone that's happened to watch? Remember, drop it on. We're on for a few more minutes here. I actually, so what I like about this platform is that you kind of have a central location for managing your Argo City instances, right? So there's this big debate versus a hub and spoke architecture, right? Where you have kind of like a central Argo City instance, or have an Argo City instance per cluster, or have a subset of that. What's really cool about Akuity is you can have it all, and on top of that, you can have you have like a central console to kind of manage all of it. So that's kind of pretty cool. And I think, Talhad, actually, I have a great question here. Can we get it on-prem? That is a fantastic question.
Yeah. We just recently announced our self-hosted offering, which, if you come from the home labbing community, self-hosted might be a little, misdirected. You can host it on really any platform that you want, but it's really well supported on like AWS and GCP. So if you just want to host it yourself and take all of the components and have full control over the environment, you have that. But the same deployment strategy does work for on-prem if you're interested. So we've got solution architects that would be happy to make sure that we can get our self-hosted edition working for you. And in theory on OpenShift, have I tested it personally? No, but it's still Kubernetes at the end of the day, so you can get it to work.
Awesome. That's really cool. That's something I wanted to get my hands on, but I pinged Nick, and he goes that it's not public yet. It's just Akuity customers only. So I think which is fine. But like I'm always the one itching to get my hands on things to test them out. But that's really cool. That's really cool that it's a self-hosted is available.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's one of the things we talk about a lot. You'll see it across a lot of the Red Hat stuff is the hybrid cloud, right? A hybrid cloud. Bare metal, self-hosting, on-prem. None of that's going anywhere. It's just getting augmented, really. So the words failed. You know what? I don't know why I tried. The jet lag is just very real today. Yeah, the on-prem offerings, that's it. That's how you stay competitive. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. No, for sure. Cool. All right. Looks like we are at time, right? We're at top of the hour. I actually have another meeting to get to, or I'd be happy to stay on. So Nick, yeah, tell people where to find you. Where's the best place? I know you said that before, but kind of tell them any parting words here.
Yeah, hit me up on Twitter at Morey Tech. I'm also on LinkedIn. I surprisingly have a much bigger following on there. I guess businesses are, that's the domain
different
that
crowd.
we're in.
Yeah, different crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm always on the CNCF Slack, so happy to talk in my DMs or ping me in a Slack channel. And yeah, thank you, Christian and Hilliary, for having me on. This was a fun conversation.
Oh no, for sure. We love to have you back on when those secret updates have come out.
Yeah, right. Like next time with mysterious updates revealed, right? That might be the episode title. Akuity's mysterious updates finally revealed.
Title. Yes,
that's the title. We'll put it on a T-shirt, maybe. Also, I don't know. We'll do something silly with it. But yeah, definitely would love to have you back. Also, where's Daniel?
That's right.
Yeah, maybe we'll get both of us on next time. See if I can pull him away from all of his sales engineering that he loves doing.
Yeah. Like we asked him, he goes, "I will not be coming on." And I was like, "Wow!" Like just at least he's direct. There he is.
There he is.
He's creeping. Yeah. So awesome, cool. All right. Yeah. Remember, for my parting words is remember Smithville CFPs tomorrow, last day, ArgoCon, GitOpsCon. Sweet.
Excuse to go to
Hilliary.
Vancouver.
Yeah, excuse to go to Vancouver.
Exactly. All right. Well, my parting words, as always, now more than ever, choose your technical debt wisely. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks.